Winter comes abruptly to Alaska, and it grips this vast northern wilderness for over 6 months. The Aleut Indians named the place the Great Land, Alyeska. Winter is a long, hard test of survival for plants and animals. Snow cover and freezing temperatures last for over 6 months. In September, as winter begins, moose gather for the rut that decides which bulls will sire their next generation. Willow ptarmigan are among the very few birds that stay to face winter. They've gathered into flocks, and they've started to change into their white winter plumage to blend with the snow and avoid predators. Plant activity has effectively retreated underground. Plants survive by storing sugars in their roots. As snow accumulates, the grizzly bear digs them up, high-energy food for its long winter sleep. In a few days, this pregnant female will retire to her underground den. Deep sleep is her way of surviving the winter. It makes fewer demands on her stores of energy. Moose are the largest deer in the world. Antler size signals a bull's rank to other males. The fittest mature bulls have the largest racks, and this sign of authority is respected by younger bulls. The dominant bull in an area attracts a harem of cows around him. He regularly digs a shallow pit into which he urinates. This excites the cows. His urine contains hormones that arouse them and probably help synchronize their breeding condition. Until his cows come into heat, he must ward off the attentions of all neighboring bulls. Rival bulls with equally massive antlers pose a serious challenge to his dominance, which must be met head on. The loser retreats. Fights are a trial of strength to decide which bull mates with the most cows. The victorious bull cautiously checks the sexual readiness of one of his cows. Inhaling her odor is part of this procedure. The cow moans because she's not quite ready. A receptive cow lingers. The bull gently taps her rump with his chin to get her used to his presence. The cows are in heat for only 24 hours and are mated only once each year. Copulation is over in seconds. Moose live mainly in forested areas. Alaska's spruce forests form part of the vast conifer belt called taiga that circles the world's northern regions. The most extensive, undisturbed forests on Earth, and in Alaska, bounded by some of the most majestic mountains. At the height of the last ice age, 17,000 years ago, much of North America was engulfed by glaciers. The animals and plants in their path were wiped out or pushed south. However, in Alaska, sparse snowfall prevented the ice from covering two large areas which served as refuges, where animals like moose survived to recolonize the north when the ice sheets retreated. Today, what was the northern of these refuges is now the Arctic slope, treeless plains, tundra, extending to the Arctic Ocean. The Brooks Range divides the Arctic slope from the other former Ice Age refuge, the Alaskan interior. Wedged between two great mountain ranges, it's mostly covered by spruce forest. The caribou, like the moose, survived in the unglaciated areas of Alaska. Now, as winter sets in, they migrate south from the Arctic slope into the relative shelter of the interior forest. Here, they're forever on the move in search of food, mainly lichens, which cover the ground in much of the interior. They're superbly protected against the bitter cold by a dense winter coat. By October, willow ptarmigan have almost completed their change of plumage. They've a highly specialized diet. Nearly all of it consists of willow buds. Willows are the most widely spread and successful shrubs in northern regions, and ptarmigan have adapted to exploit this abundant food source. They feed mainly on the ground and avoid flying, thus saving energy. They're at home in the snow. They're so at home in it that they'll even roost under the snow at night, so they're better insulated against the bitter cold. The moose rut is over. The cows are carrying new life. To survive winter, moose depend on their reserves of accumulated fat. Cows are more likely to survive than bulls. The dominant bulls especially are at risk. They've already drawn heavily on their fat reserves during the exertions of the rut. This bull may have mated with many cows, but will he survive the winter? He's no chance of making up lost energy on his meager diet until fresh greenery is available again, 8 months from now, at the end of the long Arctic winter. Surprisingly, under the snow, brown lemmings remain active. They tunnel through the snow in their search for food. A blanket of snow protects them from the driving wind and bitter cold outside, where the air temperature can be minus 60 degrees centigrade. Under the snow, it rarely falls much below zero. The flower buds of cotton grass provide an important winter food for lemmings. They were produced by the plant before winter and are packed with nutrients. Their nourishing diet enables lemmings not just to be active at this time, but also to be one of the very few animals which breed in the depths of the Arctic winter. Three weeks later, new life arrives in a nest beneath the snow. Lemmings breed prolifically, and every 3 to 5 years their numbers increase dramatically. But a population explosion is quickly followed by a crash because the lemmings' dwindling food supply can't support them in such numbers. Some survive, however, and continue to raise young under the snow. It's April, and the days are rapidly lengthening. The Arctic caribou start their trek northwards. This is their most urgent journey. It's led by the pregnant cows, who must make their way hundreds of miles to the Arctic slope, where they'll give birth to their calves. What actually triggers the migration is still a mystery, but snow texture seems to play a vital role. The need to conserve energy means that their migration north usually begins before the spring thaw has turned the snow soggy and difficult to walk through. While the snow stays powdery, progress is fairly easy, especially walking in single file, stepping in the tracks of the animal in front. Passing over the mountains, they seek out areas where the wind has blown away most of the snow, making both travel and feeding that much easier. Often their route takes them thousands of feet up into the Brooks Range. The warmth of spring gradually releases the land from snow. Meltwater streams drain into valleys and swell the rivers, placing immense strains on their mantle of ice. The willow flowers. It's one of the first plants to respond to the longer days of spring. Willow ptarmigan are still feeding on willows, but now they prefer the catkins. These contain more sugar than the buds. The winter flocks of ptarmigan have disbanded. Now each male establishes and proclaims his territory. Intruding males are aggressively repelled. The winning male returns to his mate. She has changed quickly into her camouflaged plumage, which matches the ground on which she'll soon nest. The male stays conspicuous for longer, which helps advertise his presence to rivals. As the land is released from the grip of winter, the first geese arrive. They spearhead a massive influx of migrants that come to breed here. In the mountains, the female grizzly has emerged from her long winter sleep. And with her are two 3-month-old cubs. This is their first excursion into the world outside the underground den where they were born. Their exuberance is clear. Grizzlies eat almost anything. Their diet changes with the seasons as different foods become available. In early spring, there are succulent roots to feed on, which are full of stored energy. For the first few months, she keeps to high ground, avoiding the valleys and the male bears that prefer to feed there. Males have been known to attack and eat young cubs. She's an extremely attentive mother. Play is often a prelude to nursing. She'll suckle her cubs several times a day for up to 2 years before they're fully weaned. In the valleys, a mass of fresh greenery appears in early summer. The cow moose gave birth to her twin calves just as the young leaves began to open. Now, especially after the 8 lean months of winter, she needs plenty of nourishment for herself and for them. She browses on leaves mostly, but also eats bark. Its calcium content enriches the milk for her calves. Green plants make the sun's energy edible. And plant eaters, like moose, utterly depend on this. Northern plants have a very short 3-month growing season, and the moose have had to adapt to it. They must eat constantly, not only to supply their daily energy needs, but also to replenish their fat reserves, which are vital for them to survive the winter. In this short time, they must eat for the whole year. Baby moose stick closely to their mother. Despite her size, they're still vulnerable to predators. Many of them are killed by grizzlies. This male is gorging himself. He'll eat everything except the skin and hooves. In early June, summer in the interior is well underway. But further north, it has yet to begin. The geese are nearing the end of their journey north. Flying between peaks of up to 9,000 feet, they cross the Great Barrier of the Brooks Range. 700 miles long and 50 miles wide, it divides the Alaskan interior from the Arctic slope. The geese have come to their tundra nesting grounds, braving the spring snowfall from as far away as Mexico. They're drawn by the promise of abundant summer grazing and must hatch their young in time to take advantage of it. The geese mated during their journey, so the females are ready to lay within a week of arrival, but everything is governed by the unpredictable weather. While there's snow on the ground, she can't nest. The longer she has to wait, the fewer eggs she'll lay. And in a bad year, she might not lay at all. The pregnant caribou have also crossed the Brooks Range and arrive on the Arctic slope to calve. After snowmelt, much of the Arctic slope is a vast waterlogged plain. A foot or so below the surface, the ground is permanently frozen. Permafrost, as hard as concrete to depths of 2,000 feet. The shallow soil layer cracks as it thaws and refreezes each year. Meltwater can't drain through the permafrost and collects in countless ponds and lakes. All this shallow water is of great importance to a tiny life form. Billions of mosquito larvae have hatched from eggs that survived winter frozen under the snow and ice. Although individually they're minute, collectively they'll have a massive impact on the life of the tundra. Virtually all the caribou calves are born within a week of each other. They're nourished by the richest milk produced by any land mammal, and they grow amazingly quickly. Within days, they're able to keep up with their mothers as they travel towards the rich summer grazing areas on the Arctic slope. The bulls traveled separately from the cows. But now they all come together to feed during the long daylight hours. With only about 3 months to complete their life cycle, tundra plants grow very quickly, even on soil chilled by the underlying permafrost. Their rapid growth is due to the fact that for much of this time, the sun never sets. Throughout winter, the roots held stores of nutrients. Now they pump them into leaves and flowers. The tundra becomes a carpet of nutritious young plants, and this is the attraction for fantastic numbers of caribou. As many as 200,000 caribou mass on the Arctic slope in one of the greatest natural concentrations of grazing animals in the world. Many species of wading birds breed on the Arctic slope. They all migrate thousands of miles to do so. When they're nesting in the open tundra, they must be well concealed from predators. The northern phalarope's nest is hidden within a dense grass tussock. Other birds are beautifully camouflaged, like the buff-breasted sandpiper. To avoid attracting undue attention from predators, the semi-palmated sandpiper warily walks to her nest rather than flying to it directly. Nearby, an Arctic skua settles on her nest. Arctic skuas prey mainly on the eggs and chicks of other birds. They're a bold and conspicuous predator of the tundra. On one warm day in late June, in ponds all over the tundra, adult mosquitoes start forcing their way through the water surface. The Arctic slope becomes a vast mosquito hatchery. Within hours, the tundra is swarming with millions of mosquitoes. As mosquitoes take to the wing, thousands of wader eggs are hatching in synchrony. Their breeding's perfectly timed so that the eggs hatch just when the first swarms of adult insects emerge. The ruddy turnstone's chicks have also hatched out, and like all wader chicks, they must immediately fend for themselves. They're never fed by their parents. They can't fly yet and don't have the strong probing bills of the adults. All these different chicks are totally dependent on a readily accessible supply of insects, primarily mosquitoes, that can be simply pecked from the vegetation. The abundance of insects explains why such a diversity of waders fly so far to breed on the Arctic slope. This golden plover has flown over 8,000 miles from Argentina to raise her brood here. While her chicks are wandering around looking for food, they're vulnerable to predators, such as the Arctic skua. The male does all the hunting for his mate and the newly hatched chick. On returning to the nest, he regurgitates the prey whole. This is much too large to be fed directly to the chick, so the female pulls it into pieces, which she then swallows. Later, the female coughs up the half-digested pieces whenever the chick becomes hungry. The male has to work hard to satisfy the chick's appetite. Eating is hard work, too. This is the territory of rough-legged hawks. They nest on cliffs overlooking the flat plain of the tundra. The female alights at her eyrie and shades her young chicks from the heat of the midsummer sun. She's waiting for her mate, who's out hunting. He arrives with prey in his talons. He leaves it there and resumes hunting. The female shares out the prey among her chicks. Rough-legged hawks sometimes catch young birds, but they mainly hunt for lemmings and voles. On the plains, the mosquitoes are still hatching. In the brief Arctic summer, they've little time to complete their life cycle. The female mosquito requires a rich meal of blood to speed the ripening of eggs inside her. Mosquitoes swarm on warm, still days, and with no wind to prevent them, they settle on the caribou, who close ranks and head off to seek relief from the intolerable irritation of thousands of bites. At the height of the mosquito season, a caribou can lose up to a litre of blood in a week. Their grazing is so interrupted, they can become undernourished and weak. The mosquitoes drive the caribou to the shores of the Arctic Ocean. Here, cool winds blowing off the melting ice pack help disperse the mosquitoes. In extreme cases, the caribou are forced offshore, right into the sea to seek relief. Shorter days signal the end of the brief flowering season. Now, plants must produce their seeds, like the cotton grass. mosquitoes have laid their eggs and died. Now the caribou are free to move away from the coast and disperse inland to lush grazing pastures. In the cooler month of August, they must feed unceasingly to restore their strength for the travels of autumn, and to put on fat to see them through the winter. They drift slowly south towards the interior, making their way back into the foothills of the Brooks Range. With the arrival of autumn on the Arctic slope, most of the animals have left. The green of summer disappears as plants draw nutrients from their leaves and store them in roots. The tundra flushes with color. The weather deteriorates rapidly on the Arctic slope. Clouds and freezing mist swirl into the Brooks Range. For a short while, the mountains will shelter the interior from the onset of winter. In late summer, flying squirrels feed mainly on fungi. Under the forest floor, some rather curious fungi called truffles are fruiting. Because they're underground, they can't disperse their spores into the air. But they give off a distinctive scent, irresistible to the flying squirrel. They provide a large part of its diet at this time of year. The squirrel digests the flesh of the truffle and later excretes the spores. Truffles, like many forest fungi, are essential for the healthy growth of the trees. The flying squirrel's extraordinary gliding ability ensures that truffle spores are dispersed through the forest. In this way, the flying squirrel helps maintain the health of the forest upon which its own survival depends. By September, the bull moose's antlers are fully developed. They're shed and regrown each year. They're made of bone, and while they're growing, they're covered in a velvety sheath of skin. When the antlers have finished growing, the velvet shrivels and is rubbed off. Two bulls spar half-heartedly, practicing for the serious rutting duels which begin in autumn. Surprisingly, hibernation is virtually unknown in the Arctic. It gets too cold. So animals that remain active in winter must store enough food to see them through. Red squirrels set about it with feverish urgency. They cut thousands of spruce cones for their winter food supplies, tossing them from the treetops. The cones are full of ripe seeds and are stockpiled in a network of underground chambers where the squirrel lives during winter. In the mountains, a piker, a relative of the rabbit, is also busy preparing for winter, but always alert for predators like the golden eagle. Once the danger has passed, the piker can get on with cutting grasses and herbs again. He carries each mouthful back to his home under a jumble of rocks. Here he stacks the cuttings in loose piles. He must gather enough winter fodder to last about 8 months. He turns his harvest to dry it in the sun, and then it's stored deep in the rock pile. The snow line creeps inexorably down the mountains as autumn progresses. The grizzly bear scours the hillsides looking for food. Since their emergence in spring, her cubs have greatly increased in size and have grown a thick winter coat. They'll sleep with her in the den this winter, before leaving next year to fend for themselves. Berries are essential for the grizzly because they're rich in sugars that can easily be converted into thick layers of fat. This provides the energy that grizzlies need to keep warm during their long winter sleep. Now they've crossed the Brooks Range, the caribou make their way into the interior. The great summer herds have disbanded, strung out over wide areas as the animals filter back towards their wintering grounds. They're excellent swimmers and cross the rivers in their path easily. Caribou need a lot of room to survive and cover immense distances in their unending search for food. The Arctic herds roam tens of thousands of square miles each year. The health of Alaska's wilderness is reflected in the vitality of these herds. Winter follows them south. The temperature drops rapidly. A scum of ice on the river indicates that the freeze-up isn't far away. In October, thousands of waterfowl, such as these brant geese, stop over at sheltered coastal areas of southern Alaska after leaving their tundra nesting grounds. A large proportion of the world's geese, ducks and waders breed in the Arctic. There's nowhere else on Earth that provides such a burst of plant growth or explosion of insect life, and it's this which enables them to raise their young. The geese rest and feed here briefly before continuing their southward migration. Now, about 250,000 square miles of the state of Alaska, together with its vast natural resources, are protected by the most wide-reaching conservation measure ever enacted by the United States Congress. It recognizes that Alaska represents the last chance for the United States to protect unspoilt environments on a grand scale. But despite this legislation, Alaska is under increasing pressure to exploit its natural resources. We must hope that the same far-sighted spirit which made laws to protect 40% of this state will make sure that any future development doesn't destroy one of the last great northern wildernesses. The geese fly from winter, leaving what for the present can still truthfully be called the Great Land, Alaska.